Right, so I did a review of the Black Opal Direct beginner's parcel, or at least an unboxing anyway. Today I'm just going to carve up this piece here. It's got a pretty bright purple flash across the top of it. It's got a tiny bit of black potch, which, because of the size of it, I reckon we'll end up getting rid of that, and it'll just be a crystal opal with a purple flash across it. Nothing exciting, but it's just from the beginner's parcel from Black Opal Direct. So instead of using the rotary tool on this, I'm actually going to go ahead and walk through how to do it by hand using Whetstones. It's basically exactly the same as the way you do it with sandpaper as well. So the wet and dry sandpaper can be used for the same purpose in the same way. I'd recommend putting a block of wood or something under the sandpaper, just so that you don't scratch up the surface underneath it. So here we're starting off with a, what's this, 240-800 grit. So basically a container, the stone's inside it, the water level's just below the edge of the actual whetstone, so you can easily just get more water across onto it. Shift it over a little bit more like this. Yeah, so you can easily just chuck some water across it. You can see here, if I can get this, I'll just rotate it a few times. See that bright purple flash? The camera's not aligned with me at the moment. It's kind of like a person sitting next to me kind of thing, or kind of 90 degrees-ish, 45 degrees from me, so when I see the flash, the camera sees it quarter turn more or so. So yeah, it's got quite a bright flash on it. And then yeah, the other side's just got a little bit of black potch on it. But overall, we'll polish this up. The shape-wise, it's probably most likely just going to be a ordinary opal, unless some of these sand inclusions speckled around the outside are going to cause me any grief. But yeah, basically start off, it'll be the edges just get sanded down on this coarse grit, which we'll do now. I will attack the surface of it a little bit with the 240, but then we'll just flip this stone over to the 800, and then we'll be moving over to some other whetstones. So this one will be the next one, so 1000, 4000. Gotta let it soak in the water by swapping over this one for a bit, but we'll get around to that when the time comes. So I don't know, basically you just want to grind away however you want really. At this point you're just being pretty rough with it. Basically just get that outer edge how you want it. All the rough shaping can be done on this 240 grit. Everything after this is basically getting rid of the cutting marks of the previous grit, until you get down to a fine enough grit to have a bit of a pre-polish going on, at which point you can change over to if you've got a really high grit whetstone, you can use that all the way through, or you can switch over to a glass polishing sandpaper, and then we'll just finish it off with a bit of polishing with cerium oxide on leather. These whetstones are about, I mean, you can buy them on eBay for about $20 each, or you can go direct from China and get it for about half that price, which is what I did, I think. The only problem with getting it from China, sometimes the suppliers have a minimum order of something ridiculous like 50, but in those cases you can get them for about $7 each, so maybe a bit of a retail opportunity for someone in Australia if they so chose to go ahead with that. Yeah, so there's a bit of a outer lump here that I just want to round off a lot more there and everywhere else. Other things to keep in mind is just not to push down too hard or hit it down too hard, because this stuff is fairly fragile. I haven't played a lot with the black opal, but the black opal pot seems to be some of the most fragile of all the opal. A lot of the Cooper Pedy white opal and everything is actually pretty robust, and you can kind of bash it around a lot. But this stuff, it's kind of, yeah, you got to be a little bit careful with it. The speed at which you do it, kind of got to be careful there as well, in case you, I mean, you'd have to go pretty quick, but you can go so quick that you heat up the stone and that can cause a fracture. But, I mean, the water keeps it pretty much the same temperature as the water, as long as, yeah, you're not going turbo speed. So, there we go, getting rid of that edge. Big purple flash still there. Not grinding the face of it yet. Now it's going to be a little bit uneven, just because that black pot seems to be going in on a bit of an angle there. Yeah, still need to round it off a bit more. This is much quieter than doing it with a, well, any kind of machine like the rotary tool, Dremel type thing, or cutting wheels. So if you're up late at night and there's people around and you just want to polish off a rock for whatever reason, this could be the way to go. This technique definitely works for other rocks other than opal. I'm just not overly interested in other rocks. Channel name, I just wanted a bit of alliteration, you know. I'll take the face of this a little bit. I'm going to be much gentler on the face. Just want to have less cutting marks that I need to wear through. But there are a lot of inclusions on the face of it that need to go. Now that purple flash, I'm only really seeing it localized into that kind of position there, so it might end up being that I do have to get rid of all of this rubbish around the outside. But I think I'll wear that down, rounding it off a little bit as I go. And if there's no colour there, I'm going to have to grind that right back, which all will be done on this 240. Yeah, just take your time. It's a lot slower than if you had a wheel or whatever. Probably be finished with this coarse grinding by now if I had a cabbing machine, but we're in the slums down here, so I'd rather spend my opal, my money on decent opal rough than on equipment at this point in time. Cheap camera, cheap lighting, cheap whetstones. Actually, on that note, in terms of cheap whetstones, these are okay to buy fairly cheap. One thing that I wouldn't recommend buying are these metal diamond coated whetstone, sharpening stone kind of things that you see on eBay and whatnot. I mean, this is a 400 grit, but at first, even though it was fairly rough, feeling across here, it's gone pretty much fully smooth, and that was only after a couple minutes of use. I mean, as soon as I was rubbing a rock across it, it was just falling apart. So I don't know if I just got stitched up with a crappy batch, but these, I mean, they cost like, I don't know, $2 or something like that when I bought them. But yeah, I tried to use them because I thought, I mean, thickness comparison, you can stack 100 of these compared to one whetstone. For storage wise, I thought they're pretty good, and they're only $2 or whatever, so I bought a couple, and yeah, they've all turned out pretty much useless. You can get them in different grits, so there's 1,000, and that one held up a little bit better, but yeah, the coarse grit ones were Absolute waste of time. Absolute waste of the couple months of waiting for a Chinese shipment to get here. But you never know until you try. And luckily enough, I've tried it for you. You don't have to worry about it. I'll probably fast forward at this point, or cut to when I'm done on this stone, and we'll have a look at it. Have a look at it at that point. I should have it fairly well shaped and a lot of these inclusions gone. I might even tidy up the back a little bit. So yeah, I think I'll pause the recording here and I'll be back on in a minute. Back for a quick update. Ground away at the opal a bit more. So the purple flash is still in the same spot it was before. It really is just localized to that area. So there's probably a good couple mils around the edge that we can get rid of. The black potch, or what I thought was black potch, actually turns out to be a really unusual inclusion. I can't even really describe what it looks like. It's not like a bug or anything like that, but it's, I don't know, it's kind of, there's visible like scratching and a bit of a cloudy kind of, maybe some sort of plant material stuck in there, which might end up actually being the most interesting part of this stone. There was also a tiny crack that I forgot to mention when I was looking at the piece, and it's caused a little piece to shear off the edge there, and the crack actually continues a bit further, so I'm being really careful with this area, though the purple flash doesn't seem to go all the way over there. If I grab this pencil, kind of, the colour seems to be localized to a fairly small area, which doesn't include this crack anyway. So I think the idea is that I will cut it all the way back to just capture that purple, and then it's a matter of just getting rid of all these inclusions. That one's going to be tough. I might actually have to cut that one in, and I also want to get rid of these inclusions at the back that'll still be there, just because this will be a bit of a crystal opal and you'll see the inclusions at the back straight away. So I'll just give it a quick wetting, that'll make it more obvious. So I might just go for that little area, the rest of this can be lost. And I think that inclusion, yeah, that inclusion does sneak in, but it's not that deep into the back, so I might actually be able to get rid of it. I want to get closer to it and actually see what it is, because if it is some kind of plant material, it actually does look pretty cool. In which case I might just keep that and not really worry about the colour too much. So yeah, interesting. Beginner's parcel. Piece from the beginner's parcel's quite fun to play with. Other things to mention about this Whetstone idea. One thing that I'm working on that I haven't actually pulled through with yet is actually wearing some nitrile gloves while I'm doing this, just because your fingers do get a lot of water on them and they're underwater a lot of the time, and you start getting that kind of wrinkly finger effect like you've been in the bath too long. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But yeah, alright, I'm gonna cut back to just include that colour, and I'll bring a further update once I've got to that stage. Boy oh boy, we've taken a wild turn of events here. So basically this is the opal. It's pretty much shaped to how I want it. It's still got that broad flash. If I can, I'll just make sure that I orient it in a way that the camera will pick it up. I think that's one of the best shots of it there. And it's quite a couple angles where the blue flash comes. There's also a really subtle green flash on one corner, but really it's that purple blue flash across it that's amazing. But that impurity that you can see here in the back has turned out to be the most interesting part of the entire stone. So hopefully, I haven't really edited a video like this yet, but you should be seeing a picture now of what that actually looks like. And because it looks the way it does, I mean, it basically looks like some sort of horror movie tree kind of movie scene kind of thing. So I really actually want to keep that impurity more than I want to be bothered with the color, really. So I'm going to basically still treat the stone like I would any other stone, except I'm not going to go through and grind away that last, that black section. I could grind away and that would get rid of this amazing looking tree thing in there. It must be, I don't know, some kind of plant material or something, but it's amazing, so I'm keeping that. But normally from this point I would grind this all the way back down until that black impurity is gone, because it's not that deep anymore. I've exposed it as much as possible, and just so that I can see it better. But yeah, at this point it's shaped right. There's still some inclusions and stuff on the face here. I'm going to grind those away, but I'm going to switch over to the 800 grit on the opposite side of this stone. So I'll be switching that over and just rubbing this down further till I get rid of all these sand spots. There's a couple on the back side here as well that I still want to get rid of. I just don't want to damage the inclusion that's in there, which is a mental thing to say when you typically want to get rid of them. But yeah, that's the current state of affairs on this stone. It's taken a turn that I didn't expect, that's for sure. Black Opal Direct have supplied me with an absolute gem here in the beginner's pack. I can't believe it. It's not like anything I've ever seen. I've seen some posts on Facebook where people have moss agate and the likes, where there's all sorts of like floral patterns and stuff within the material, but this one basically got a nice purple flash on one side and then this just highly detailed tree kind of picture on the back. So basically we're just about done on this core side. If this were a normal stone, I'd be using the core side to grind away until that impurity is gone, and then I'd be switching over to the less coarse grit just to get rid of the last few little bits of inclusion here, because I don't want to take off too much of the colour. So there's a green flash on that kind of steep angle just in there, but it seems to be a bit deeper, so if I grind down a little bit more, I reckon that green will get hit as well, and we'll have these competing blue and green flashes, which would look nice. And if I wanted to get rid of this inclusion here, I'd probably grind it all the way down, and then I don't know, I'd probably sell it off as a crystal opal for someone to do a doublet. I don't do any doublets or triplets, so this would make a really good doublet. But yeah, I want to keep him. This will be a keeper for me for sure. Hopefully I've managed to edit the video in a way that you got to see what I'm actually talking about. Otherwise it's just going to sound like I'm trying to keep an inclusion for no reason. But yeah, I'm just gonna maybe, I don't really want to risk grinding any further into that inclusion. I don't want to clip it because that might just smear it all. I think, yeah, at this point I'll just get this face done so that we can just pretend it's a normal opal, and then we'll get to the polishing, pre-polish and polishing stage. So I'll be back once I've got some of those spots out. Alright, so I've dried the stone, so it's back to that hazy, cloudy, mega scuffed. I mean, you can see all the cutting marks. We're just using a pretty brutal stone at, what was it, 240. But it's good to dry it between these stages, because here you can see where there's still a few deeper patches where there's a sand spot there, there's a sand spot there, there's a tiny sand spot there, another tiny sand spot there, and then all those cutting marks. There's some chips along here, some really strong cutting marks there, and some tiny sand spots just here. Those cutting marks on the bottom side here where it's the back, so it's fairly flat, mainly because I sit there and I just push along, so it's just under my finger now, and you just push the thing along just to neaten up the back. But yeah, if it's wet you just don't see all of those tiny sand spots. I mean, you can still probably, I don't know if the camera picks those up, there's still two obvious ones there, but those chips that were just here are completely gone. Can't see those, can't see the tiny sand spots over here, can't see the small sand spots over here. The water does bring back that bright flash though, so we haven't lost that, and definitely haven't lost my little tree. I'm hoping that the polish actually reveals that really well. I couldn't care less about the colour at the moment. Like Opal Direct, they've given me something amazing here. I did think that this was possible in Opal, but I'd never seen it myself. And now that I see this, I mean, this is instantly shot up to my favourite stone that I've got. And this is just the first out of the 12 stones that I got in that beginner's parcel that I'll put a review up for. An unboxing slash review. But yeah, now it's exactly the same as before, except we're not shaping the stone, we're happy with the shape. Well, relatively, I might bring that edge a bit down. But we're basically just getting rid of all those deeper cutting marks. A lot of gentle pushing and pulling when you're going down into this kind of grit. I mean, this is still pretty strong. This is 800. Yeah, so that was 240. We're now at 800. But just because you've gone down a grit doesn't mean you should be pushing the same kind of strength down. Use a bit of left hand, right hand. Get good with your left hand and right hand, because this does take some serious time and energy. And your fingertips from doing all of this pushing down will actually get pretty sore. So yeah, I typically do the less important backside with my left hand, because I mean, you can just sit there and do this for a while. Whereas when you're actually trying to shape the front face, you've kind of got to do this kind of rotating position from the center to the outer points just to get that nice high dome. And we're going for a pretty high dome on this because we've kept it really thick, because we're not actually going to get rid of that impurity. I don't know why I'm actually calling it impurity, it must be my chemistry background, because it's actually an inclusion. But yeah, I mean, that inclusion's amazing. I can't lose any of that. That's actually really exciting. Doesn't sound like it because I'm still struggling with the idea of actually talking to myself in a room with the camera, but it is actually really exciting. I'll definitely try to get in touch with Black Opal Direct and send them a good picture of this. Maybe they might even watch my video. Nah, he's too busy for that. He's grinding bloody $10,000 stones. Here I am with this thing that he probably wouldn't throw me 50 bucks for. But to me, this is worth a lot more than any of the other stones that I've carved up so far. Just because of how much I like the actual inclusion. But yeah, I'm going to be going at this. I'll make sure those little sand spots disappear. This 800 grit's the last time I'm going to be trying to actually change any of the shape or remove any serious amount of stone. So after this, the rock will be basically doing the slow increase in polish. So yeah, I'll be back when I've got these little sand spots gone. Alright, we're back. So this is the opal at the end of that. Sand spots all gone. Major scuffs and chips and cutting marks all gone. Still got the flash, still got the tree. So I've switched over. So this is a 1000, 4000, but because we just finished the last block on 800, oh, the water's still warm. We finished the last one on 800, I'm jumping straight to the 4000 here. And here we're just doing it real gently. Just basically that cloudiness you see, getting rid of that. So yeah, flash is still there, we haven't gotten rid of that. Hopefully I've picked a angle where it comes up on the camera. And then that little tree inclusion. But yeah, basically from cloudy to less cloudy basically. It won't be perfect after 4000, but it's a fairly nice pre-polish on a lot of material. I haven't actually, this is the first lightning ridge piece that I've done though, so I don't know how easily these polish up. But basically, real gentle, hit every surface. Not changing any of the shape, not applying pressure. Just polishing. It should feel much smoother than it did on the past couple stones when you're doing it. But yeah, no pressure, just backwards and forwards. You can change the direction to make sure your cutting marks will crisscross out. But yeah, I'll basically be doing this until it's, well, until I'm happy with it. And we'll come back to the video at that point. Alright, so done with the 4000 now. So basically, this is it dry. It's still that foggy look to it. You can still get a little bit of the flash coming through. This is it fully dry, but you're still getting that purple flash. Comes up a bit blue on the camera, but it is more of a purple. I've still got my tree, haven't lost him. I better not lose him. I think that's about impossible at this point. So now you should be able to look at it, and it should look just like that frosted glass that you see in bathrooms a lot of the time. So it's just that hazy look to it. And you should be able to see the colour starting to flash through a little bit better than what it was when it was covered in scuff marks. So no clear cutting marks. If there are clear cutting marks, go back to this, because the more you do on this at this point in time, the better it'll be, because the polishing part, especially by hand with no tools, will take a long time. We're talking hours possibly. I'm going to try to do it with just my fingers, but the other thing we can do at this point is, because the back's still that frosted roughness, we can actually get a dop stick. And for my dop sticks, I'm basically just using chopsticks. I think this is just a bamboo skewer of some sort. I'd use a bigger piece than this, but basically 2-part epoxy straight onto the back. Make sure your opal's nice and even, and then you'll be using that to basically get your cerium oxide polish done. So the cerium oxide that I've got is this stuff right here. The colour of it can vary, so this one's a bit of a reddish one, but you can get all the way through to a white. There's a beige, there's a white. I haven't used too many different types. I've been using that bag of red for ages now. I'm not sure if it's all that great. I haven't really had any pieces that I wanted to get a real mirror polish on, because I just want to do that kind of mirror finish when I've got something that I really like. But basically just on a piece of, I've seen some people use felt, but I use a piece of leather. All I've got at the moment is a piece of leather that's basically been cut out from an old leather jacket, and you basically just make a paste, chuck some powder on there, and then just a couple droplets of water from your finger kind of thing, and yeah, basically grab your opal, and it's a lot easier on a stick for sure, but you get the idea. You've just made this paste and you use the friction of the cloth and that fine powdery paste to basically polish your opal. But be prepared for this to take a long time, and if you've left any cutting marks in there at all, you've got to go back to the 4000s. I mean, there shouldn't be any major cutting marks after 1000, but definitely go back to the 4000 if you see anything other than a frosted glass appearance on the top of on the surface of your opal, because it's just not going to help you at this stage. This won't get rid of cutting marks no matter how long you do it, but this will take a long time even if you have done a better job. I find that using a 1200 grit sandpaper piece a bit better than going direct from the 4000 Whetstone through to this, because as the sandpaper degrades, that 1200 grit sandpaper actually will become much finer than that if you keep just rubbing it on the one spot. This won't be quick, so I'll be doing this, listening to music, listening to podcasts, maybe even watching a Opal Direct video just for inspiration to keep me going at this. I know they posted a video at one point doing this similar technique, but I think they did use sandpaper, and he said he did this for hours as well, and he had his dot. Doing it just with your fingers like this is even harder, takes even longer. One thing to keep in mind doing this is that the opal will build up heat, especially if you're just going real quick backwards and forwards. You can feel it under your fingers as you're doing it, and that heat can cause an opal to fracture, especially if there's some sort of crazing going on or a crack that goes all the way through. If it's got a crack that goes through, it might completely break on you. If it's crazing, then typically you might just get some bits coming off it. But you can already see here, I've only been doing it for a few minutes, but it is starting to get a little bit less frosted. The problem for me is that with this piece I'm more interested in the back than the front, so I can dop it on the back and then polish the front for that flash of colour, and then maybe just do the back by hand, just sitting there like this. But polishing a flat surface like that is even harder, so I don't know, I'm gonna not be having very much fun with this one at all, I think. But I'll see how I go, and I'll be back when I've got this to a reasonable state. Alright, wow, what an opal. It's been a wild ride, this one, actually. I was just trying to record a simple whetstone example, but we've got something out of this in the end. So basically this is the purple flash. It's still there, just there more now that it's been polished. But that impurity now, well, that inclusion that I'm so obsessed about now, has actually, since polishing the front, has become even visible through the face of the opal. But if I switch it around, we can get more details in it. I mean, just looking at it on the screen, that's amazing. There's also these weird, like, it almost looks like scratch marks, but it's inside the opal itself. I'll hopefully be able to put up a clearer picture of this rather than a zoomed in video version. I've got enough focus, you can see it starting to show through here on the camera. So it's got this weird, like, Chinese lettering kind of markings throughout it. But it's this horror movie tree scene kind of thing that I'm loving so much about this opal. I mean, it's really amazing. I haven't seen anything like this in all the ones that I've done so far, and this came out of Opal Direct's beginner potch. Oh, I guess it's got a bit of colour in it, so it's not straight potch, but I mean, looking at it from the outside, a lot of it is basically just potch-like. And yeah, I could easily grind this to be a nice crystal opal, but I'd put more value in that inclusion than anything else. And this has all of a sudden become my favourite opal. Bloody hell, guys. This is just one of 12, I think it was. So I've still got all of these left. It's just the first one. In terms of how far it's been ground down, I mean, I initially started the video and took the thumbnail will probably be something like the rough opal sitting on top of here. So just for comparison's sake, it's definitely gotten much smaller. So down to a third of the size or so. But yeah, I'm excited to see what some of these other ones are actually going to be capable of, because some of these show far more colour. I only picked this one because I thought it was a good example to do by hand. It turned out to be pretty involved, but it's come up okay. What I will say about the polish is that it's not perfect. I can get a better polish using a rotary tool, but if we can get it to focus, all in all it's pretty glossy on the front. Doing the edges is pretty hard, so you can see that's still got that foggy kind of, well, the camera doesn't make it any better, but that foggy kind of look to it. See how it's still that hazy and undulating a little bit, but that's just hard to get rid of when you're doing it by hand and you're kind of just holding on to it. And then the backside I've left still fairly rough, but I might end up polishing that to more of a mirror finish, though I'm not overly worried about it now that I can see that tree setting through the front face. But I do like that it's right there on the back, and that's where you get that Chinese lettering underneath it and everything as well. So yeah, that's the end of this one. That's how you go about using Whetstones and a bit of leather and cerium oxide to get it all done. The cerium oxide polishing took at least a couple hours. It's a very involved process, especially since I just went from the 4000 grit Whetstone straight onto leather and cerium. There was a lot of little cutting marks and stuff to get rid of. But now you can feel that it's, well, I can feel that it's a lot slipperier, so that frosting really makes it easier to handle. And now you can see that I'm just getting fingerprints all over it now, which is annoying. But yeah, if we refer to Opal Direct's little template here, I'd say body tone of jelly and brightness of, well, it's bright, but it requires a lot of play to get it to actually properly flash. So yeah, somewhere it's vivid, but it's hard to see. The play of color is just not as good as you would like in a top quality gem. But this one for me is just all about that tree image, which now for some reason I can't get it to focus on. And that tree image and that Chinese lettering. I don't know, if I put a piece of paper behind it, does it become more obvious? It does become a bit more obvious. So all those little scratchings in the bottom there. It looks really nice. Then yeah, some sort of nightmare tree. Can't believe it. All from a beginner's parcel. So for those of you out there looking at getting into Opal, I mean basically this entire process for this bit was to get Black Opal Direct beginner parcel, of which I've still got all of these rocks. On top of that, we used 2 double-sided Whetstones, 240 to 800, and then we skipped the 1000, went straight to the 4000. And you can get those in a higher grit. I wish I did have one in a higher grit. I think I do, I just didn't bother using it. I'm about to gift these Whetstones away anyway. So yeah, all up, I mean the Opal costs more than any of the equipment that I've used. This Cerium oxide powder costs next to nothing. You can get this wherever. You can get it from some local shops. That's, yeah, very watery right now. It's kind of settling out into the bottom. But yeah, Cerium oxide costs you $10 and you can buy a bag of it. Each Whetstone, the Whetstones, if you buy them locally, are going to be pretty expensive. But if you go for a Chinese, direct from China, you can buy them. If you get lucky, they won't have a limit of 50 minimum to order. But if you can get 1 or 2 from eBay, they range around the $20 mark. Whereas if you get them direct from China, they're about $7. So they really do mark them up and resell them. But at least then it's Aussie stock and you're not waiting forever. And there's no minimum order, you can just buy one. Yeah, so even at the highest price on eBay, you'd be looking at $25, $20. So that's $50. Cerium oxide, 60. It's definitely not an expensive hobby to get into if you're just looking at doing something like this. Yeah, and even at that price, you could be better off just going for a rotary tool. I mean, the one I've got just here, and the one I've done the one that featured in my equipment overview, is just this Zito. If it'll focus on that. Whoops. Just tapping the tool instead of the screen. Yeah, so this is a Zito rotary tool with the flex shaft and a few attachments and stuff which I'm not using. But that is $50 as well. So instead of getting the Whetstone package, you could just get the rotary tool, in which case you're spending a similar amount of money, but God, you can do this so much quicker. I mean, you're talking, instead of spending an hour on each stage, you're just looking at spending, I don't know, 10 minutes to get the shape sorted and everything, and the polish is much quicker. Polishing this by hand, especially without dopping it. I should have dopped it, but without dopping it, made it, yeah, really extended out that time a lot. But yeah, hopefully that video gives you an idea of basically the minimum requirements needed to be able to polish an opal. You can go the sandpaper route, and I might put up a video of me doing the next one on sandpaper out of one of these again. Maybe that white cap one. That's interesting. The sandpaper route, then you're looking at spending, I don't know, $2. I think it's like $1.50 per sheet at Bunnings. So $2 per grit. You're using, I don't know, five grits. So that's an even cheaper way to go. We'll do a video on that, I reckon, next, and you'll get an idea of how that looks. But yeah, that's much cheaper. The sandpaper method, though, for the first stage of the actual shaping it, I mean, I could give it a go on sandpaper. I've never done all the shaping on sandpaper because I feel like that'll take a really long time and it'll degrade the sandpaper much quicker than a Whetstone, because I can go pretty hard on that 280 grit Whetstone. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for this one. An amazing opal, not in terms of its opal properties, but in terms of its inclusions, which, yeah, is not something I've ever said before on any of the ones that I've carved up or polished. So this is This is a first for me, and I'm glad I got it on camera. It's just, oh, it's a hell of a scene inside an opal. So yeah, next video, probably me doing the same process with sandpaper instead. So I'll see you on that one.